Hey, hey, hey. Let me know that you can hear me. All right. Can't wasn't really sure if this mic was getting picked up or not. So I see a few of you on. Just type in the comment section if you will, so I know that you can actually hear me as we get started here. All right. So we're talking about masculinity, right? And a topic that has been or a phrase that's been thrown around a lot lately is toxic masculinity. And I actually did a poem on it recently that I'll link to in the description. And the problem with this phrase is that it doesn't it's not really usable, right? It's not really useful, and it feels very uh, attacking. It feels like, because toxic is an interesting word, right? And toxic means that something has poison in it, right? Toxic is when you are being affected by a toxin, by some kind of a poison. And so by putting the word toxic next to masculinity, what that does for a lot of people is it makes them think that it's an adjective for masculinity in general, that masculinity is toxic or that men are toxic. And I think understandably so, a lot of men defend against that, right? And that becomes an attack, a counterattack sometimes that doesn't help any of us. And so what I want to talk about in this video is how to be what I'm calling a real man, and real is an acronym. So I'll tell you what each of those letters stand for here in a little bit. But I'm not interested in labels and these vague concepts that can't be implemented, right? I mean, I'm a coach. I've been a life coach and a business coach for a long, long time, and I'm only interested in things that we can implement. I'm interested in concepts that we can immediately put into motion, not these vague switches that we're just going to flip, right? So what happens is a lot of times men are told by society or by men or by women or by anybody to not be angry or don't abuse or stop being weak or stop being toxic, right? And all of those don'ts aren't all that helpful, right? We got a lot of don'ts. We got a lot of what we're supposed to not do, but we don't have a whole lot of things that we are supposed to do. And one of the things I think is very divisive in our society is the use of labels that are not understood all that much, right? Because labels, for the most part, are not inherently the same. Some people think masculinity means one thing and being a man means another thing, and being strong and being weak. And so these labels really don't help us see sameness in each other. And as long as we don't see sameness in each other, then we'll just be focusing on the differences. And when we're focusing on the differences, then a lot of times we feel like anything different is threatening. So I'm not interested in the vague, do this, don't do this approaches that really haven't gotten us anywhere. And one of the reasons that those kinds of approaches don't work is because they're not very clear. We don't know. And somebody who abuses isn't just intentionally abusing because he enjoys it. He doesn't wake up in the morning. And I'm just using he as an example right now because of the topic. Everything I'm talking about is not only specifically men. I'm not interested in stereotypes and all of that. And for the sake of certain examples, I'm just going to use, certain pronouns just for clarity, right? But in the context of toxic masculinity, and specifically with men, people don't wake up and just go, today I'm going to be abuser. Today I'm going to get angry and lose it on somebody. These are not just intentional choices. These are things that happen because people don't know how to avoid them. And so when we take a look at what toxic masculinity is or manhood is, the only thing that's going to avoid the problem is actually diving into the solution, right? The real solution, because what we're trying to avoid, what we're trying to stop, what we get angry at other people for doing, and specifically men for doing, are symptoms. They're not the problem. So a man might erupt on somebody, and society or other people will say, well, if he just wasn't angry, then he wouldn't do this stuff. Well, the anger is a byproduct of a seed that isn't being addressed. So instead of chasing the behaviors and trying to punish or trying to rely on discipline to avoid temptations that our bodies just have inside of us, instead of trying to manipulate the behaviors, I'm more interested in solving the actual problem. And I don't think society really is interested in solving the actual problem. At least the way we discuss things, especially on the internet, doesn't look like we're interested in solving a problem. What it looks like is that we're interested in just attacking each other. We're just interested in labels and blame, and it's these people's fault or it's these people's fault. And that's not going to solve the problem, especially it's not going to solve a problem from a place of connection, from a place of fellow human beings coming together and saying, how can we live together? How can we love together? How can we be human together? So when we get in these conversations with all these labels and the finger pointing, then naturally what happens is we defend against labels, or we defend against the things that we think are threats to us. And inside this conversation of toxic masculinity, one of the prevalent phrases that is being both attacked and used as a defense mechanism is some version of, boys will be boys, right? And I'm not interested in any form of excuse for abusive or controlling or criminal or any kind of behavior that hurts other people. I'm not justifying it. I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying we're playing up here. We're focusing up here. We got to look down here. We got to look at what are the seeds that are actually creating this behavior. And masculinity is not the problem. Manhood is not the problem. Men are not the problem. Boys are not the problem. The problem is the pain. And broken boys become broken men who can't handle their brokenness. And I'm using that word just because it fits this particular context, but it's really the pain of something that happened. It's some form of trauma. It's some form of embarrassment. It's some form of feeling like we were victimized. And then that doesn't get healed. That doesn't get solved. And all that happens is the physical body grows, but the pain stays. The problem, the issue inside stays. And as a wounded boy grows into a man, the wound is still there. And time doesn't heal the wound. Alcohol doesn't heal the wound. Sex doesn't heal the wound. Pornography doesn't heal the wound. Drugs don't heal the wound. Abusing other people doesn't heal this wound. Abusing yourself doesn't heal this wound. Gambling doesn't heal the wound. Numbing behaviors don't heal the wound. There's no kind of coping behavior that can heal the wound. Only healing does the work. And so we have, I think, what are false misunderstandings, or misunderstandings. I guess all misunderstandings are false. We have these misunderstandings of what it takes. First of all, what the actual issue is, and then what it takes to solve the issue. And I want to make it really simple before I get into this acronym. The simple solution is humanity. That's the solution. Humanity does not have the desire to harm other people. When we're born and start to grow and evolve as a little child, we don't have the desire to harm anybody. We don't have the desire to do any of the problem behaviors that are focused on as we become adults. So the solution is actually to surrender back into our humanity. But the problem with that is and I'm just specifically talking about men right now, we have not been taught how to relate to our humanity. In fact, it's and actually, let me say that again. We have been taught. We just haven't been taught properly, in my opinion. We haven't been taught correctly. We haven't been taught that our humanity is good. We've been taught that our humanity is bad. Now, we don't use those terms. What the terms that are used are: emotions are bad, pain is bad, weakness is bad, vulnerability is bad. But see, all of those are our humanity. All of those make up what I believe is our sacred experience here as human beings. So we are taught, especially as boys, that our feelings are bad. Our humanity is bad. Our humanness, our vulnerability, the things that are just naturally happening in us as we grow on this planet as a human being, a lot of those things are bad. And so what we do is we try to protect ourselves from those feelings that are bad and that will cause us to be ostracized by our own team, by our men. We don't want to. One of the worst things that we can feel is not belonging. So we don't want to lose the favor of our men when we're growing up as boys. So we'll do whatever we want to do. They want us to do. We'll play by whatever rules there are. And some of the unwritten as well as the written rules are: don't be emotional. Don't be human. You have to be strong. You have to always be on your game. You can't ever let anybody take advantage of you. And I'm not saying that all of that programming is inherently wrong, and it's definitely not intentionally given to our boys to harm in any way. But the message that so many boys get is to remove themselves from the feelings that they have, from the reality that's going on inside, from the thoughts that they have, from the doubts, from the worries. Remove all that stuff, because that's dangerous. That's vulnerability, and that's not what being a man is. So this solution is not a question of ability. There's nobody that lacks the ability to do what I'm going to propose to you in a second. It's just a permission question. Do you have permission to be real? So R.E.A.L is an acronym. And again, I want you to be able to implement these 4 pieces, not just intellectualize them. Because when you become the essence of these 4 things, you don't have to effort at much of anything else. The work is pretty much done when you can become the essence of these 4 things. So the R is rigid. Now, what I mean by rigid, or the context of rigid, is be rigid with your masculinity. Because masculinity is powerful and it's beautiful if you understand it. Masculinity is discipline, and it's strength, and it's linear, and it's logical, and it wants to provide, and it wants to protect. All of those things are great if we stay rigid with them and they're aligned with our values. They're aligned with the decisions that we've made in our lives. They're aligned with what we want to create in the world. So when we're rigid with our own masculinity and we stay disciplined in alignment with our values, meaning that we do what we say we're going to do, we make promises and we keep them. We set out to protect our family. We provide for our family. That's divine masculinity. That's the root of being a man. That's the root of this energy called masculinity. And what that does is it creates trust with other people. So the masculine force is powerful if we allow ourselves to be in it in a pure and a divine way. So that's the R, it's rigid. The E is expressive. See, the problem that so many men have is that we don't express ourselves. And when we don't express, then everything is suppressed. In this context, that's the opposite. When we suppress our thoughts and we suppress our emotions and we suppress our truth and we suppress our voice and we suppress our desires, when all those things get suppressed, then what we have is a pressure keg. And so many men are walking around with such heavy pressure in their lives. And the way that a lot of men decide, even though it's not a rational thought, it's not a conscious choice necessarily, but the way that a lot of men express their feelings is in an unhealthy way. And we create this blast zone all around us. And anybody that's in our blast radius gets hurt in some way, shape, or form, right? So we have to express so that it doesn't just stay cooked up inside us. It doesn't just keep boiling up inside of us. Now, the connotation of expressing our thoughts and our emotions for many men, the way that we're brought up, the connotation of that is that it's weak, that it's vulnerable, that you can't be emotional. And then the connotation of emotional itself becomes weak. And we think that being emotional equals crying. That's a lot of times how we refer to crying. I almost got emotional. No, you almost cried. Emotions are way more than just crying. But since we don't want to cry because it's weak, then we don't want to be emotional, the label that we put on crying. Then we don't want to touch our emotions. That's the human experience, touching our emotions. So we have programmed ourselves to not be willing to touch our emotions, and that's where all the pressure gets created. So in order to avoid all that pressure, we need to express. We need a safe place to talk about our feelings, a safe place to talk about our thoughts. And sometimes that might not be your family. Sometimes it might not be your marriage. Sometimes it might not be your parents, might not be your kids. Depends. But there has to be a place to express. And I'm actually going to put in the description here a phone number and an email. So any of you men specifically, but women, this is fine too. If you just want to express something, get it out of yourself. You can't heal anything. You can't solve anything while it's inside of you. Get it out of you. I will not return any calls. I will not return any emails unless you explicitly ask for it. We'll just read them and delete them. Listen to the voicemails and delete them. There has to be a form of expression. There doesn't even necessarily have to be communication back. But I want to give you a way to express whatever is on your heart. You can say whatever you want. It's all confidential. You don't have to leave any information whatsoever just to get it off yourself. So be expressive. The A stands for authenticity. Got to be authentic. And that's, again, it's easy in terms of the doing part, but we don't give ourselves permission. We just got to surrender into being real. Be transparent. Be authentic. Be truthful. Be vulnerable. Vulnerable masculinity is actually very, very powerful, both to the man and to anybody around, whether it's men or women, adult or child. Vulnerable masculinity is so incredibly intoxicating. It's just that we don't see it very much. We don't see it very much because we as men are afraid of what that's supposed to mean if we go there. But the more authentic we are, the easier it is. I mean, the less pressure we have on ourselves, and the more other people can be themselves around us as well. So that divine, authentic, vulnerable, pure masculinity does a lot of the healing. It does a lot of the protecting. It does it's like a self fueling and self-propelling and self-healing mechanism. I mean, it does the work. It's just a matter of us being willing to surrender into our authenticity. And it's so exhausting trying to pretend you're somebody that you're not, trying to pretend you're strong, trying to pretend you're confident, trying to pretend you have no weaknesses, trying to pretend you have no fear, trying to pretend you have no pain, trying to pretend you're more successful than you are, trying to pretend all these things that are coming out of the protection of the pain. When we're pretending in order to protect, it takes so much of our energy away from who we truly are. And then the final letter is L, and it's love. But it's not just love as a verb. It's love as a noun. It's love as an essence, which is our true being. That's who we are. We are love, but we as men are not programmed to be okay with love in this form. We're not programmed to want love. We're not programmed to give that kind of just pure essence of love. We're programmed to give it conditionally. We're programmed to receive it conditionally. We'll get love and appreciation and acceptance as long as we're performing on the sports field, or as long as we're performing in the classroom or in the bedroom or in the boardroom or wherever it is that we're performing. Then it's okay. But it's all conditional, which increases the pressure. So we as men need to learn to relate to what masculine love is. And the masculine energy is actually quite loving. It just looks different than the feminine love, but it is, again, beautiful, and it's powerful, and it's intoxicating. I'm going to use the word again because that really truly is what it's like. It's breathtaking, but it's also breath-giving. It gives life, it gives trust, it gives protection when it's wrapped up in its divine package. And so because a lot of us have been taught to cut ourselves off of emotion in general, then love is one of those emotions that we are programmed to cut ourselves off from. So we as men need to reprogram ourselves that love is okay, that love from a man is okay, that love being given as a man is okay in a pure masculine energy. That's really what we need. And I think the planet needs this kind of divine fatherly love, protective love. See, that kind of love doesn't attack other people. And one of the problems in our society that I think has become an epidemic among men is that we continue to attack each other. You see it everywhere. You see it in the media. I was watching a sports debate show this morning, and there were 3 men on there, and every single one of them was just attacking the other one. And you're wrong, and you're stupid, and this is why you're wrong. And they're jumping on top of each other. You know, we're talking about sports. We're talking about things that don't mean anything in the grand scheme of things, right? But it's not the topic. It's the way that they were viciously attacking each other about a topic. And I just thought that is how a lot of men relate to each other. And so if we think we're going to be attacked by men, then we need to have our defense up. We need to have our counterattacks ready. And what we often do is we attack first. That's not fatherly love. That's not masculine love. That's not being a man. Tearing down another man doesn't make you a stronger man. Raising up another man makes you a stronger man. And the more that we feel full and complete and whole and divine with ourselves, the less threatened we will be from and by other people. So that's why the essence of being a real man, rigid, expressive, authentic, and love solves all of these problems. The masculine energy inside of these 4 components does not have the desire to hurt somebody, does not have the desire to numb anything out, because there's nothing to be numbed in that same kind of coping way. And it's okay to have pain, but we got to express it. We got to be with it. We got to feel it. To some extent, we can enjoy the experience of being a human who's going through pain or who's going through worry. And we won't manifest this toxicity when we can stay inside of these 4 elements. So I hope this has been valuable. I'll engage with the comments here. I haven't been engaging while I'm doing this live video, but I'll engage with the comments afterwards here. If you have any questions for me, any other topics you want me to address, anything at all, then please let me know. I would love to know what your thoughts are on anything that I said, or especially, not only especially, but including if you disagree with anything that I said, then please let me know. As long as it's a healthy discussion and it's not an attack. But if there's anything that you have to say inside of this conversation, then please let me know. Yeah, actually, somebody just said an insecure man is dangerous. Now, the only thing I would add to that is it's not just an insecure man. I agree with that. I would just add that it's the insecure masculinity inside the man. Because the insecure masculinity inside of a woman is dangerous also. And that's a topic for a different video. But I appreciate that, because that's totally true. And the more that the masculine is trying to control and abuse others, the more insecure that particular being, whether it's a man or a woman, is. And men are just programmed more often to attack outward. Women are programmed a little bit more to attack inward, just in general, not every single situation. So this is not a brush stroke, that I'm saying is applying to all 8 billion people on the planet. But the level of external abuse, control, violence is going to be matched by the level of internal insecurity. Because a secure masculine channel, or as you just said, a secure man, doesn't have the need, the desire, the temptation to do any of that negative behavior. So I appreciate you all. Let me know what you think. And we'll be talking more about these topics and so many more inside the Conversation Masculinity in the future. Take care, everyone.